Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 21 Hats podcast. I'm your host, Loren Feldman. This week, Shawn, Busse, and I talked to John Garrett about his contrarian approach to newspapers, marketing, and competition. Garrett has built a Texas-based chain of print newspapers that has managed to outcompete established news organizations and digital platforms for both community engagement and local advertising. Not surprisingly, when he first took out a $39,000 credit card loan in 2005 and started telling people that his business model would feature a monthly print publication that he would mail to everyone in his target communities for free, he didn't get a lot of congratulations. And not everything he's tried has worked. An expansion into Arizona, Tennessee, and Georgia, for example, failed early in the pandemic. But almost 20 years after its debut, a period during which most local publications have been in retreat, community impact is thriving. From his seat as a publisher, Garrett offers a perspective on marketing that any business owner would be wise to consider. Even in good times, owning and running a business can be a lonely pursuit. Our hope is that these weekly conversations, brought to you by our principal sponsor, The Great Game of Business, will let owners know they are not alone in facing challenges. Same thing with our daily newsletter, the 21 Hats Morning Report, which Inc. magazine named the best newsletter for business owners and which you can subscribe to for free at 21hats.com, where you can also find transcripts of our podcast episodes and lots of other articles and interviews. Joining me this week on the podcast are Shawn Busse, CEO of Kinesis, which is based in Portland, Oregon, and works with small businesses on marketing, culture, and strategy, and John Garrett, CEO of Community Impact, which publishes community newspapers throughout Texas. The episode is titled, I Didn't Know It Was Going to Work. But before we get started, I want to play a snippet of an interview I did with Kevin Walter, who is one of the co-founders of Tasty Catering in Chicago. This is one of a series of interviews I'm doing for our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, with business owners who practice open book management. When Tasty opened its books, Kevin was the point person, and he later went on to become a full-time coach with The Great Game. This audio segment starts with me asking Kevin about the impact of the pandemic on Tasty Catering. How did Tasty do during COVID? That seems like it would have been a very difficult time for a catering business.
Oh, of course. We rely on groups of people to generate revenue and cash, and there weren't many groups of people once the governor shut the state down. We actually stopped doing our huddles, forward-looking forecasting huddles that we did weekly because it was just a wash in red numbers. We were down 95% the first month off of where we were supposed to be. Our team came to us and said, all right, we're tired of looking at the red numbers. What really matters is how much runway do we have before we have to start looking for jobs. They wanted truth and honesty. Most other caterers either closed their doors or laid off everyone but maybe one or two employees. And mysteriously, when PPP money became available, 2, 3, 4 months later, they mysteriously reopened so they could get their hands on the money. We kept everybody employed. They told us we need a minimum amount of hours a week. We'll take a 10% pay cut. The owners will take 30%. But we've got to keep this band together because this is going to end. And when it does, we got to be together and ready to seize more market share from caterers that are slow to react or they can't get their people back.
Was it the PPP money that allowed you to do that, to keep people on board?
Yes, in part. The other part was those reductions. Another part was pivoting. I know that's an overused term nowadays, but we move people around through the different companies. So the contract manufacturer of baked goods, they have the capability to wrap things single service. So that business actually picked up a bit. We rotated people around to make sure we made the minimum hours no matter what company it was in.
You can read a text version of my entire interview with Kevin Walter, including his explanation of why Tasty Catering decided to open its books at 21hats.com. And now, on to today's show. Welcome, Shawn and John. It's great to have you both here. John, I still don't completely understand how you're doing what you're doing. So I'd like to start. Could you just explain your basic business model to us? In other words, how are you making print work here in 2023?
Yeah, thanks, Loren. Well, the basic premise is that even though we live in the information age, no one knows what's really happening in their own backyard. We put together all that information that matters to you, that's news to you, that you care about in your community, and we send it to you. And people love it. And since people love it and they read it, then advertisers, want to be a part of it. And that's how we generate our revenue. We're not a subscription-based product. We're a free, high-quality local journalism product that really connects people to their communities, and local businesses are a big part of the community.
But what you just described could kind of describe local journalism for, the last 100 or 200 years. And yet publications have been closing all over the country. Why is yours succeeding where others are failing?
Well, I mean, there's probably several ingredients to that. But let's also not discount, strategic decisions that a lot of those news organizations have made for a variety of ownership reasons and whatever reasons, just bad strategy planning. But the critical piece, I think, for us as a news organization that we are today is the circulation piece. We mail 2.5 million newspapers every month to residents all over Texas. That's by far more than any publication actually in the country. And so when a lot of the local news organizations, the legacy, I'm talking legacy right now, when they've made their strategies on circulation costs, like how much it costs to subscribe to your local paper, they've ramped that up so much that their circulation has just plummeted. And if circulation plummets, then fewer advertisers are interested in that audience. And so then, their model is, let's build a reader revenue model. So they're just trying to drive circulation dollars, while Google and Facebook and TikTok and all those guys just say, thank you. We'll take all the local ad dollars. And their product just isn't competitive any longer. We are competitive because we're local. And for most local businesses, geography is the number one filter. Do you live near my store? Do you live near my restaurant? We do geography better than, I would say, even better than Meta, or better than a lot of these digital companies do.
And what do you mean by that? Because obviously they do it with geofencing and other digital techniques. What are you able to do that they can't do?
Yeah. So, I mean, we know every address we're going to. There's no digital ambiguity about, the cell phone and, exactly where it's at. The other thing is that, if you continue to look at Round Rock news articles, we know that you care about Round Rock. So we have, good first party data. So, just naturally going to every single household in a geography is pretty impressive, as opposed to buying, geo targeting, which I think is a great product. So, but when you're talking about competing, right? We're not saying we're the only ones that can do geo targeting. When you're talking about going to a business owner and saying, hey, do you want to reach these people around you? We need to be able to compete, and we compete very well. And so that's just unique. I mean, none of the large dailies in any of the cities that we compete with here in Texas, none of them can compete from a geographic standpoint like we can. It's not even in the same conversation.
Yeah, I could see that. It's like when I go online and I say, what is my IP address? And you look it up, and it has me over in Hood River, which is about 45 minutes east of Portland. And if you're advertising to me thinking I'm in Hood River, all of those ad dollars are wasted. It's not even that close. What people are realizing is that a lot of these digital media companies actually aren't quite that good at targeting as they say they are. And that's a whole nother thing. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, man, I got lots of thoughts on that.
Throw your competition under the bus. Go.
Listen, I mean, it used to be cheap, right? It used to be inexpensive to go on Facebook, do all these targeting tools. And they know a lot about us. Obviously what Apple's done to Meta is crazy. I've always felt like the data was wrong. But now, I mean, even if they are really good at it, they're expensive. They're not inexpensive any longer. And so we compete with them on dollars. And the other thing is that we're tangible. And I think that that's really important. I talk about this word called phygital. We live in a phygital world. We're physical beings in a digital world. Retail stores are coming back. Physical stores matter to us. And, in Round Rock, Texas, and in Austin, Texas, and Frisco, Texas, we're a tangible product to the business owner and the decision maker. So Facebook's not really as tangible, right? So I think that gives us a little bit of an edge because we have people there in those cities. But also we show up at the business owner's home address. They kind of know who we are. I think that helps. That gives us a little bit of an edge.
Could you take us back? When did you and your wife start Community Impact, and what gave you the confidence back then that, at a time when, a lot of media companies were struggling? What convinced you that this would work?
Well, I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. I had all these really stupid ideas that my wife would always turn down, but I'd been in the business for my whole career at that point. And I was like, I don't know. I just kind of drew out this idea that my wife and I, we had a 2-year-old kid. We didn't care about school sports. That's a big thing, a difference between us and other community papers. We don't write about sports or courts or anything like that. We write about business development, local news, government, So our focus area was always like, hey, what do people actually care about that don't have Johnny kicking the winning field goal that lives in their family, right? So we really focused on things that we felt like people were interested in and curious about. And so I don't know. I think any business owner, most business owners I know, there's a lot of, I did not know that it was going to work.
Appreciate you admitting that.
I took a $39,000 credit card loan to start it. And because, it was hard to get loans and you're still personally liable for it. So I took and I had one of those, it was like, 1.9% financing for the life of the loan as long as you pay the minimum. I did that. And, I was young enough in my career where I felt like I could make those mistakes and then still go get another job. So I don't know. I just felt like it was a good idea. And, I'd been in the business. So that's the other thing. Like I grew up in the business. So I knew a lot about the business. I knew not only the business side, but I'd learned some of the journalism side at the Business Journal here in Austin. And so that gave me, I think I was kind of ready for this move, but I didn't know it was going to work. My first issue, my costs were about $30,000 a month to print, mail, and I had a couple of staff members, and we were really smart. On the front end, we did, $16,000 of revenue, but it was 50%. So we told everybody, if you sign a 12-month contract, we'll give you 50% in the first month, which was really smart because that meant month 2, we had $30,000 booked of revenue. And so we were pretty much cash flow positive month 2.
Wow.
Which is really, really helpful when you're spending, $16,000 a month on printing and mailing. So I was kind of stupid, to be honest with you, about like how fast would cash run out. I think I was kind of blind to the reality of how cash flow works, but it worked. And I did a lot of prepaid that, my customers helped finance, obviously, the business because we took the payment up front. Printer gave us terms, but postage does it. Like you got to prepay postage. So, but, learning, just being scrappy at the beginning, I think helps. Like, if you prepay, I'll give you a little discount, that kind of thing.
When was it you started, John?
We started in 2005 in Round Rock, Pflugerville area. It's a northern suburbs of Austin, home of Dell Computer Corporation. And it's not a sleepy town. I know a lot of people around the country think we ride horses to work. It's high tech. It's a high tech town, and it's a great place to start a newspaper.
How did you sell those first deals? You basically have an unproven thing. You don't have any, credibility in a lot of ways, right? So clearly people trusted you. How did that happen?
Yeah, I had a graphic designer kind of put together like some mock boards, and they're like giant poster board size, but really nice, of what it would look like. Because it was so new. It was just a different concept. So I needed our customers to visualize it. So I had these 2 giant boards. I'm walking around with one of those, big art portfolio cases. And I'm just taking it to local businesses. I'm like, hey, don't you think, Round Rock needs this? And listen, I got told no a lot. Some of the most successful business owners in the city that I had looked up to, right, said things like, you're going to mail 60,000 newspapers. You're crazy. And I got a lot of no's, but how I got yeses, there's a lot of luck involved. Like one of the biggest healthcare companies here in Austin, this woman never answers her phone. She told me this years later, but like I called and she thought it was her, her family. And so she answered it. And I got a meeting with her, and she was a big support at the beginning. So, I got kind of lucky, but I think I had relationships. I was in the Austin market. I knew local business owners. I had a lot of people take chances on me. I think about one of my invoice number 1. His name's Ken Monchabias. He owns a steam cleaning place here in Austin. A lot of entrepreneurs want to help other entrepreneurs. And I think just being vulnerable to business owners like directly is a really good way to to build trust. And there were a lot of Austin entrepreneurs that just helped me because they wanted to help me. And that's something special.
Yeah, I think that's such great advice. So often I'll talk to somebody who's trying to get something off the ground and they approach it from how do I sell and convince, as opposed to just asking for help, right? Like in a way, that's what you're doing, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
You're going out there saying, hey, can you support this thing? Here's why it's different. And sometimes people will say no, but then they'll point you to somebody else who will say yes. And that's a whole nother thing too to think about, is how do you turn a no into a yes?
That's exactly right. Saying, I love what you said there. Like, will you help me? We would say that. Will you help us bring local news to Frisco, Texas? We had no credibility in those cities, right? But will you help us? That's really good. And you're right. They will redirect you to other people. That's really good advice.
Even from early point, it was almost like a higher purpose, right? So it's like you're saying, like, we need this. Will you help us? As opposed to, I'm running a business trying to make money and I'm trying to sell you. So it's a very different way of approaching it.
Yeah, it resonates with everybody to say what I said, we're in the information age, but no one knows what's happening in our backyard. Like that just resonates to us all. There's all this information and it's everywhere. It's out there. Where do I go to find the city council agenda? Where do I go to find out what they're building behind my house? Hey, are they going to build something cool nearby? When's this road going to be done? Right? Like, where do you go find that information? It's out there. We just, curate it in a unique way and we send it to everybody and people are like, thank you.
John, you told us that, today it's a lot more expensive than it used to be to advertise digitally. And today you have tremendous credibility. You're sending your publication to every home and the advertisers that you reach out to know that and understand that and believe that. That wasn't the case in 2005. Back then, who did you see as your competition? And back then, your digital competition was a lot less expensive. How did you win that battle?
Yeah. So we did view like the local dailies and the local community papers as competition. We won by circulation. Like, it wasn't even close. The Round Rock Leader, the local paper in Round Rock, in a city of, 50, 60,000 people, they might have been going to 3,000. We were going to all of them.
Wow.
So for us, our selling pitch was kind of a cost per household. So even though it was cheaper to buy in the Round Rock Leader, sure, it's only $100 a week there. And maybe it cost us $400, but we're going to 30 times as many households.
Wow.
So we sold it on a kind of a cost per household, cost per thousand basis. And that's how we competed. But it didn't take long because, listen, one thing that we are serious about is design. And it's 35-pound high bright newsprint, stitched and trimmed. It's a beautiful product. And so it stays on people's coffee tables all week long. I mean, all month long. We're monthly. And, when they see it, quality sells. So, we never wanted to be the cheapest, although on a cost per household, we were an incredible value. We are kind of more expensive even today. Today we're really selling against, digital. I mean, we still sell against like billboards and, there's some TV sell, but mostly we're selling against Facebook and digital services and those kinds of things.
Quality comment is really interesting, John. I think about when I was in a small town, I grew up in Southern Oregon and I was in a community of maybe 25,000 people. And I remember that, you go to the restaurant and there'd be a little like wire rack and there'd be this like very poorly designed, very cheaply printed kind of like the local news sort of thing. So it was free, like yours, it was free, but it wasn't coming into my home and the quality was just terrible. And then the other option was, like you said, was the paid circulation. So the Ashland Daily Tidings, which is now out of business. So that was actually not very well done either. So it's like, it seems like you're doing something interesting here where you're giving something away of high quality.
We have like 38 editions and we have 33 designers on staff.
Whoa.
So
wow.
Most of our publications in our industry would have like 4. Right. And it shows in how we curate the news. And design's a big part of who we are.
Can you give us a snapshot of how big your company is, employees and?
Yeah. So we'll hopefully, the budget says we'll do $35 million in sales this year. We've got about 200 employees, including staff, and we have our own printing facility here in Austin. And we're all over the state. So we're in Austin, Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio. We're focused on Texas. That was a big change for us during the pandemic. We had a lot of difficulty. We were out in Phoenix, which was profitable, but what happened with the supply chain and what happened with the world just made us kind of think, what are we doing? So we're focused on Texas, which is, pretty good place to be, 9th largest economy in the world. So we're going to hang out here for a bit. We have a lot of room to grow here.
Tell us about that, though. What drove the decision to expand? And if it was profitable, can you tell us more about why you decided to stick with Texas?
Yeah. So our DNA is hilarious. Like, our DNA is like, let's fight the incumbents. So what happened with us is we were growing in Houston, Austin, and Dallas at the time. Hurricane Harvey hit Houston and hit it hard. And, we're local businesses, so they were flooded, but we just had this like mentality. Okay, giant, you're going to face us. Let's take it on. And we just felt like there's a phrase that says everything's bigger in Texas. We said the CI is bigger than Texas. So we felt like what we did should be bigger than just the state. And so, yeah, we went out to Phoenix and, listen, I'm not counting out that we will ever go national again. I think what I'm saying is the world changed. So we have this print facility here, and pre-pandemic, it made a lot of sense. We would print here, ship a day out, right, to Phoenix, and it cost us like $2,500 a truck. We could make those economics work. What happened with the pandemic, you remember the truck shortage? It went from $2,500 to $10,000.
Wow.
We could make it in our paper. By the way, paper is still like gold. Our paper costs per ton went from like $650 to $1,200. And for us, that's in our circulation, it's about $100,000 a month of COGS increase. So we just couldn't justify the mission because we were growing. We had, I think we had 5 editions in Phoenix. And what happened was there was another locally owned independent news organization that wanted to kind of go where we were. And so we ended up selling the operation to those guys and just kind of put our tail between our legs. And it was sad. We really believe that, we put a lot into it. I lost a lot of money, to be honest. And so it's kind of sad to suck that up. But today, knowing all that I know today, all that's happening in the world, like, I feel really good about that decision, even though it's as an owner and as just somebody who likes to win, it hurt a little bit, obviously, to close that down. So luckily, all of our employees were offered jobs there with the new company, and we did the best we could as an ownership group. Ownership group meaning me and my wife to take care of those folks. So yeah, we've won and we've lost. Atlanta, we launched in March of 2020. Like, really? March of 2020.
Oh, jeez.
Good planning.
That was going to be 6 weeks, right? The pandemic was going to last 6 weeks. And that's what we thought back then, right? And so anyways, we ended up closing that down as well. And we had a little operation in Nashville that we had actually acquired another publication, and we ended up closing that down too. So we just said, hey, let's focus on Texas.
And have those supply chain issues and the heightened costs, has that reverted to where things were before the pandemic? Or are you still fighting that?
Yeah, trucking's a little easier. I don't really know how much it would cost to send a truck out there now. I'm sure it'd be double, but probably not 10,000. Paper is still high. So we just got our first reduction that we've seen in years. So we got a 15% reduction cost, but we're up 100%. So we got a little ways to go. I'm not a math expert, but I think we need to get back to 50%. We had a 50% reduction. I think that's right. We'll be back to where we were before, but I don't see that ever happening. I think there's a lot of stickiness to these cost increases.
Tell us, John, I'm familiar with the Business Journal here in Portland. I know they're a national organization. Their model seems to be really built upon, a paid subscription and then events. They do a lot of that stuff, and then advertising sales. Tell us a little bit about how you differ from them and how you see your strategy when they're in a market you're in.
Shawn, I love that question, because part of the reason why I was at the Austin Business Journal, same company. Here was our sales pitch back in 2005. The reason why you want to advertise in the Business Journal is because you want to be around decision makers. The reason decision makers read the Business Journal is because we tell people about things that are happening first. And I just thought to myself, why is it only the insiders, like the smart developers and bankers and all those guys to, why are they the ones that know first, right? Shouldn't everybody, like if you own the farm that the developer knows is a road's going through it, shouldn't you like know that, you know, when he shows up at your door so you don't sell the farm, you know, for an unfair price? So that's how we flipped it. We said, no, just those subscribers, everyone deserves to know this stuff first. And so we flipped it on its head that way. We don't do events. I think that's a great business of theirs. We could get into events, I think, although I will tell you that most of our customers say, please don't do events. We're so sick of all these events. So they're smart to do it. I think it's a big revenue driver for them. And I think most people in our industry are less concerned about ad sales than we are. Print in particular. We really still believe in the power of print, and it shows in our numbers. But most news organizations are selling digital services. You know, how do I help this local business buy Facebook and that kind of thing? So more of an agency model. We're really more focused still on owned and operated. So we did create a great email newsletter during the pandemic. I think it's the best community email newsletter in the country. It's free and it's growing like crazy. We're sitting out about 180,000 a day now. So we've turned in from a monthly news organization to a daily news organization, and there's we're doing sponsored content, Loren. So there's a real product mix market fit for digital that in my opinion, hasn't been there in a long time for news organizations. You know, pop-up banners and autoplay videos, they don't get me too excited, but sponsored content is pretty fun, and it's a great product for some of our customers.
Why do you think the newsletter has succeeded? What are you offering that people wanted?
Well, I think people just want to know what's happening in their own backyard every day. There's news. So we are geographically targeted, the newsletter, just like our paper, so that we have a Round Rock newsletter. And we tell people the same kinds of things we do in the paper, but we do it through the digital email format, and people like it. So, I mean, it's really not rocket science. We're giving people news that matters to them about their area, and people like it, so they subscribe to it. It's not hard.
Are you competing with yourself, though? Does that take away from interest in the print publication?
Yeah, Loren, I think we learned that lesson, right? As an industry, some of us did in the late 90s, that's stupid. Like, give people the news the way that they want it. And what's really interesting is, like, we'll write a story about, something the city hall does in the newsletter. By the way, what's really funny about that is we would do that anyways online, but now we're actually pushing it out in an email. But the reader reads it, and then they get the paper, and we may say the exact same thing, but the way our brains work, we need to see things and hear things multiple times for it to really resonate and to be truthful and factual in our brain. So it's kind of reaffirming what they may have already known, and it hasn't impacted our business at all. We hear the same things about our newsletter that we do the newspaper. In fact, Loren, since you asked, the city of Round Rock does this city survey. I talk about this a few times, but every 2 years they ask their citizens, where do they get their news or information about the city? It's a part of a large city survey they do. They ask about police, all the public safety, all that stuff. Well, anyways, long story short, in 2020, 74% of residents said they get their news from community impact. By far number one. Like, there's nothing even close. Like, the Statesman, the daily paper here, has been here for 150 years, is like 14%. Facebook is like 40%. I think it was 74% in 2020. We launched the newsletter. Guess what happens to that number? It goes up. 77% in 2022.
Wow.
Survey said that they get their news from community impact. So I feel like it's a flywheel. Like, both the print and the digital create energy for each other. And come on, like, anybody can try to start an online news organization, but we're in everybody's home and we're online. Like, that feels like a good heavyweight fighter right there, ready to win, and help local residents really know what's happening in their backyard.
I'm thinking of all these media sources that I've consumed over the years, and it feels a little bit like the mistake that they made was that they tried to do everything poorly. They tried to be original journalism, but then they would cut their news stabs. They tried to get distribution, but they would charge just enough to where people wouldn't really want to pay for it. So they wouldn't pay for circulation. So they'd have weak circulation. They tried to make it work with advertising dollars, but then the advertisers would look at circulation and go, well, you're not that valuable. And then they tried to become digital agencies, as you mentioned earlier, and they kind of do that shittily. They're just a middleman most of the time. marking it up when you can just go DIY it or hire another agency.
Right.
So it's like they've tried to do everything, but they've done nothing well. And I think that some like the New York Times have figured out like some of this stuff is just a fool's errand. But the local publications, they've been on that train for a while now, and it seems like they can never get off it. And if I see this correctly, what I think I'm hearing from you is like we've given up a few things. Like we're willing to say we're going to get no revenue from circulation dollars. We're just not going to do that. In exchange, we're going to go to advertisers and say, hey, we touch a lot of households, 3/4 of the population in the market you just talked about. Am I hearing that right? Is that a fair assessment, or what am I missing?
Yeah, I mean, I think the only thing you're missing, I think there are a lot of independent news organizations around the country that are usually, family owned, that are doing it right. There are, and they're just kind of not on the radar. Yeah, obviously New York, when you think about big like names everyone knows, the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal are doing it the best. The Washington Post is starting to show some real cracks. Bezos is maybe regretting some of that. But I think from like most people think about metro newspapers, there's a lot of like differences between the ones that are in the cities that are around the country, but the majority of them fit that to a T. There was this philosophy around our industry that said, if you look at a spreadsheet and you have 100,000 subscribers and they're paying $300 a year, that's less money than if you have 50,000 paying $1,000 a year. And so they were willing to lose 50,000 of the subscribers to get more circulation revenue. And it was a total train wreck. And that's where these private equity companies, a lot of them have bought these news organizations on those kind of calculations in an Excel spreadsheet. And what have they left themselves with? The idea, you have a 3-puff cigar, right? So you pay for 2 puffs of it, and you get that last puff for free. And that's how they view these news organizations. There's only 3 puffs left. They say things like there's a runway left. How much runway do we have left before print dies? I mean, that's what they say in our industry. And I'm like, guys, you're just destroying your best asset.
Was it the outside acquisition that really was the catalyst for this decline? So private equity coming in or consolidation?
Well, I think they were disrupted for sure. I mean, Craig Newman from Craigslist says it's not my fault. I mean, it totally was his fault, but they just, he's funding journalism now. He's trying to be the nice guy, but he destroyed so much of the institution, the legacy stuff. And I think, I'll say this, it's starting to happen. I think AI is going to be as disruptive to local news as the web was back in the 90s. And I think it's going to be interesting to see. I think AI actually gives these news organizations who have a lot of data and can provide a lot of context that Google kind of does now. It gives them a chance to compete with Google, for information. If you really wanted to know what's happening in Oregon and you went to the archives of all these newspapers and pretend like they were actually producing new content, but some of them are. But so you can imagine what a great data set that is. So my thinking is that will the news organizations, what we learned in the 90s, how we failed at Craigslist, destroyed classifieds, will we learn from that? And in 2023, will we take this new technology that truly will, if you study it, it could disrupt Google. And if it does disrupt Google, news organizations that have data, can they compete in a new way? There's a lot of that happening in our industry. People are looking at that right now. And I see that as a huge opportunity. So I don't think it's just one thing to answer your question, Shawn. I think there's a variety of factors, but you kind of nailed it on. They destroyed their own product with pricing. They didn't invest in the thing that made them money. And now they're like, what does the market want? The market wants Facebook. So let me go sell Facebook as a third-party reseller. I mean, you're exactly right.
John, do you see AI as an opportunity for you, as something to use?
Yeah, but it's different than what you think. It's different what you think. So, I mean, what people are scared of is like it's going to replace reporters. I think companies will do that. I think that's a mistake. I think AI in the news business will be the companies that do 3 things really well can do some fun things. And those 3 things are, number one, you have to have the data. The data's got to be yours. And it's got to be new and it's going to be fresh. You got to be completely updating the data, and it's got to be old, right? For context. You can do some great things with context and new data. That means you got to have reporters finding that stuff out. The second thing is you got to have great circulation. Like, how are you going to get that information out? If it's just, a database somewhere and there's no real traffic to the side or something, like, you got to have circulation. But the third thing I think is going to be the most vital is going to be trust brand. If I trust the news organization that is using AI to give me context to what I'm looking for, home run. And I think that there's going to be a lot of organizations out there that are using AI, and they already are, that aren't trustworthy. So if the local news organizations have a good brand, they can use it. And I think that it could be a valuable tool to how we gather news, how we answer questions, and how we help local businesses succeed, right? The revenue side. So I think it's going to be a big opportunity for people.
What about the design side? Do you see, I mean, you talked about having 33 or so graphic designers who are putting these things together. Do you see them worried about that?
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of question about design in terms of copyrights and how the machine doesn't really understand art like we do. But I mean, if it gets better, I could see it being a useful tool, much like it could help a designer, think creatively. Yeah, I think it could help. I don't know what the future looks like for, our, ratio of designers to paper, but I don't know. I honestly, I haven't done enough work on the design AI side. I've been mostly focused on how it takes content, summarizes it. I've been playing around with crazy stuff, like took a CNN.com video, plugged it into ChatGPT-4 and said, hey, tell me the 5 things that I need to know about this video. So I don't have to watch the video. Man, it spit it right out. This is what the guy said on the video. All I did was inputted a link. That's pretty valuable, So that's what I've been playing around with. And I think that that's got some really cool implications, not from a cost cutting standpoint, but from a product quality standpoint. That could be a game changer for our industry.
That sounds like a good reporter's tool.
Exactly right, Loren. And let me flip that on its head, right? Like say a reporter's using it and it gets all the context and all the data. I think the one media company I really admire the most right now is Bloomberg, the Bloomberg terminal, right? They call it. That's really what this is. Now you flip it on its head and just say that we built a reporter's tool that's really amazing, has all this context, helps them write the stories better, flip it on its head and give that to the reader. Like, what could a reader do with the same tools that a reporter has? I mean, I just think that's amazing. So, it really would help a business leader, for example, understand a community that they're going to for the first time. I just think there's some really cool stuff that it could do, and I'm very curious about it.
John, how do you market your business? Do you reach out to subscribers, or do you just mail your product to them? And how do you reach out to businesses and market your opportunity to them?
Yeah, I mean, direct mail is a great product. We direct mail, 2.5 million pieces every month about who community impact is. It's crazy. Like most news organizations don't believe this, but like we get something like 80 call-in leads a week that are like interesting in advertising. It's wild. So yeah, our product is so good. It's kind of like, but in terms of like brand, we really have stepped up our brand game a lot. It's funny, they always say that like what you're really good at, you're not really good at for yourself. And so we've been investing a lot more time in our brand. We used to be community impact newspaper. Now we're just community impact. Our tagline used to be local, useful, everyone gets it. Now it's just news everyone gets. We're kind of developing as well our own brand. And, we're using HubSpot to do, some email targeting to our clients. We're doing some things, but we're still growing in that area, I think. And it is funny. We sell it, but we don't really focus on it enough ourselves. So we have work to do there.
How do you see a role in the new marketing landscape? I think a lot about how, let's say I wanted to send something to somebody. I don't even know if they're in the office anymore. Like, like if I wanted to reach out and, send somebody a really, I don't know, thoughtful gift or a letter or something, as a prospect, I don't, they may or may not even be at their office, but they have a house somewhere. I'm curious if you're thinking about that at all.
Man, that's a good one. I'm going to have to put that one in the parking lot somewhere. Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah, especially because from a circulation standpoint, distribution standpoint, we're already doing a lot there. Yeah, no, I mean, I think for us, our growth strategy right now is pretty simple. We want to build. We're calling it CI Simple. We're going to do a redesign of our paper that's a little more simple. Great design is still simple. Simple is still a great design, but we're going to do some things because we think people are learning a little differently. So we're going to try to innovate that. We're going to continue to build up our newsletter. We think that's a huge upside for us. And, we're going to grow in some new markets. We have a new approach to growing into markets that we call CI Light. And that's kind of a double entendre. You like that, Loren, right? We want to be a light to the community, but we also, we want to go in there a little lighter. We go in heavy with the print product. It's very expensive, and maybe we could go digital first with a really high quality newsletter product. So our focus is market share, like continue to grow in Texas. And then some of those side projects, like you talked about, could come in handy. I do think we need to grow. Our digital products are getting really good. When I say digital products, I mean owned and operated, like our own. So I think one of the things I'm thinking about is we've always sold advertising like per month. So we've always been kind of a 12-month contract kind of company. I really want to go to like kind of advertising as a service type model where instead of charging somebody, $673 for a quarter page ad and $350 for a newsletter ad or whatever, then we charge $1,500 a month and we do all of these things for you. And I think that's kind of a cool way to build the news organization of the future. So that's what I'm thinking about.
John, if you go into a new community where you're not established and you go newsletter first, how do you spread the word and get people to notice it? I'm asking for a friend.
Yeah. Listen, well, friend, you're doing some really smart things. I think events are a really smart way to connect, people to your digital brand. I think there's some interesting tools out there that companies are creating, for referral tools. Most of our leads come from HubSpot's pop up on our website, because it knows you're in Round Rock. So it says, hey, do you want to get, the Round Rock morning newsletter pops up because it knows if you are a subscriber or not a subscriber. So that's where most of our organic growth comes from. I mean, we're not doing a lot of marketing for it or the smart things that people are doing, but we're growing almost 800 a week. So just organically. So it's pretty good.
Are there things about the digital advertising world because you're competing with them?
Yeah. Today, I think the forward-thinking companies that are looking to do digital marketing are understanding that this whole idea of storytelling is really good. And everything that you're doing, brand image, like billboards or Insta ads or content marketing, whatever you're doing, the message needs to be the same. So if you're a business owner, the best thing you can ask yourself and be honest with yourself is, what are you trying to accomplish? Number one, are you trying to build your brand? Are you have a new product you want to tell a story about or whatever? That's number one. Number two, are you trying to actually generate, leads, like fill out this form, right? Or are you trying to generate foot traffic, like couponing or that kind of thing? You really need to decide what you're trying to do. And then whatever that is, this is where business owners get in a lot of troubles. They have all these different vendors that are selling them all these different ways to do all those three different things. Decide really what you're trying to do. What is the number one thing you're trying to do? And go all in on your marketing efforts to do that one thing really well. We do a lot of design services for free for our clients. We're like, hey, take this to the other magazine that you're advertising, or take this to your digital provider and make sure that the artwork is similar. Make sure that the goal, if you have a QR code in there or you have a click to form or whatever, make sure in every marketing that you're doing, whether you're buying banners at a little league baseball game or buying flyers or whatever you're buying, decide which of those three you're trying to accomplish. Don't mix it up. Don't put a bunch of different objectives in there. Make sure all the mediums that you're doing are going after that one thing, and go after that hard for, at least 6 months, and then make adjustments but stay consistent and find out what works for your formula. You might have to up your offer a little bit. You might have to choose a different piece of artwork. Your call of action might not be big enough, whatever. Tweak around with it, but don't spray 14 different messages all over the world and try to, guess which one's going to work. That would be my best advice. And I think that what's interesting about, the next generation of people, really millennials and Gen Zers, they're expecting that. Like, the idea that we're not going to share ideas or thoughts with our competitors anymore is so my generation. Like, if we're doing design work for a local business and we don't let them use it in another magazine, because that's what I was taught, at the Houston Chronicle when I started there, that is so uncool. And it's just not going to work. So I think we need to share more ideas with our competition.
That could have been a lawsuit in the old days, right?
Right. We need to be so generous to our customers and help them and work together with our competitors to help them. And it's more money for all of us, and the customer wins. And that's what's really the most important thing.
I think that's so smart that you see that in doing this work for them for free, but encourage them to use it elsewhere. You're not just helping them, that it pays off for you as well.
Yeah, that's right. And that's a new way of thinking, Loren. That is
for sure.
That is the next generation teaching us older people, some things. Now, listen, the next generation needs to listen to us about a few things, but we can learn from each other.
All right, Shawn, that was really interesting. Now that John's not here, tell me, what do you make of all that?
Well, I mean, first, what an incredible business mind, to build a business that's, I don't remember what he said, 35 million or something. Clearly he's like tapped into something really, really smart. And it just kind of speaks to having a good strategy and maybe in some ways swimming in the opposite direction than the rest of the market. What stood out to you?
Well, to some extent, the same thing, especially the notion of kind of running against the crowd. It's kind of interesting how these things can go in cycles, but it's almost like, you hear now that there's kind of a movement toward people doing handwritten notes again. I'm never going to do that. My handwriting's too bad for one thing, but they feel special now in a way because so few people do them. The same thing with print. I think, print looks different today than it did 10 years ago when it seemed to be going obsolete. Now there are no pop-up ads. It kind of feels a little bit upscale. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I feel like a lot of these print publications have sort of raced to digital, but yet they've created a digital experience. It's not really that enticing. I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't need another pop-up ad. So they all sort of seem to be doing that same thing. And then, I can't remember the last time I bought a business magazine, a print business magazine. And yet, I still get the local bit. We have a business journal here and still read that in print form. So I think that combination of highly relevant to your local community with the layer of quality and circulation, I think that's a pretty powerful formula for him. And I think a lot of us are maybe a little bit tired of devices.
The other thing is, it's just, for me, I mean, I started my journalism career before the internet. So I've endured some of these shifts at various publications, and they've been really painful at some of the places where I've been. And to see him come up with an entirely different business model is really kind of inspiring to me. And I think it's so counter to what the conventional wisdom has kind of been. In the old days, it used to be, everybody relied on cheap subscriptions and getting as many advertising dollars as possible. The New York Times was kind of at the forefront of flipping that. And, they put up a paywall and made their subscribers pay real money and managed to hang on to a good bit of advertising dollars and created a much more successful model. Not everybody's been able to do that. I worked for a bunch of magazines that really struggled with the switch to digital, and in some cases still haven't figured it out. They're stuck with long-term or low-cost subscriptions, and that forces them to try to generate as many eyeballs as possible to throw at their advertising, and that means they're much more focused on clicks than they are on quality. And it's just kind of a losing formula. He's gone entirely the different direction. It's not just cheap subscriptions, it's free subscriptions. Yeah. Give it to everybody. And obviously it's got to be of value. It doesn't help to give it away if people are just going to throw it out. But as he pointed out to us, people are actually getting their news from it in very large numbers. That means he's got a much larger market than most local publications. And I think that's how he's made it work.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I feel like the trap so many businesses fall into is that they try to be a little bit of something to everything. And so when he does something, he goes all in on it. So whether it's design, right? He's like, we're going to go all in and make this thing look really, really good. Not just like a little bit better, but like really good. Different paper, more expensive paper, hire professional designers. And the same, like to your point on circulation, he didn't say, well, we're going to make it a lot less costly than something else. We're going to go all in and like give it away.
To everybody in the region.
To everybody. Yes, that's another all-in, right? The all-in of the entire region, not just some.
How do you think about it, Shawn, from the perspective of local businesses in his areas, of the regions that he serves? Why is this working for local businesses?
I mean, some of it, I think, is simple choice, right? You know, I think as Google rose and rose in power and reach and influence, a lot of channels just got kind of wiped out. And then that kind of became your one choice as a business. Well, you better be, especially if you're a local, let's say, business to consumer organization, you know, it's sort of like, well, Google, that was your choice, you know, and if somebody's searching, you better be there. Much in the same way, like back in the day, like you had to be in the yellow pages. Remember that?
I do.
Like you would be a fool to not have a listing in the yellow pages.
Now you have to explain what the yellow pages are.
Well, we'll get Jay on for that, the time machine. But I think John is coming with an alternative. And when you have an alternative, then it can start to highlight for you what are the failings of the monopoly, right? So, you know, in Google, it kind of dumbs everything down to a listing and it lumps you in with all of your competitors. With a print publication, right? Now you can be creative. You can have different types of advertising. You can try different headlines. You can experiment with imagery and design. You can have special offers. Like it just gives you a lot more flexibility and creativity that it kind of gets taken away from you in the Google world because Google wants to reduce you down to a commodity purchase of advertising. And then they want to jack up the rates on everybody over time. So I think having an alternative is a big deal.
Again, though, I guess it really only works because he's sending it to everybody.
Yeah.
Which is something that, as he told us, a lot of people thought was nuts. The idea that you would print that many copies and just send it to people, whether they wanted it or not. Turns out they did want it.
Yeah. I mean, and props to him. I never would have thought that would be the way to go.
All right. Well, that's why we do these marketing workshops. I know I learned a lot from this. My thanks to John Garrett and Shawn Busse, and of course to our sponsor, The Great Game of Business, which helps businesses use an open book management system to build healthier companies. You can learn more at greatgame.com. Thanks, Shawn. Wait, don't leave yet. If you have a question or a comment that you'd like the 21 Hats owners to address, send it to me by replying to your morning report or by email at loren@21hats.com. That's LOREN @21hats.com. Do it now before you forget. And don't be afraid to tell Jay what you really think. He can take it. And if you got something out of this conversation, help us reach more business owners. Tell a friend. Subscribe and review us wherever you get your podcasts. Follow us on Twitter. Subscribe to the Morning Report at 21hats.com. This episode was produced by Jess Thuberon, founder of Blank Word Productions. Okay, now you can leave. Thanks for listening, everyone.